have usually found that when you ask such a question which has multiple raising of hands, the number of hands raised on both options is rarely equal to the total number of people present. Because kuch log to utha hi nahi pate hain. But you people have proved that wrong, so good for that. The other thing which I'm very, very happy with is that a lot of you regard chaos as positive. I'm really surprised. I thought that the answer would largely be, negative. I must credit the organizers and when they would have chosen this, topic. Because ये मत समझिएगा कि जो भी मैं अगले 20 मिनट में आपसे कहूँगा, all that wisdom I had. नहीं, far from it. But when you're supposed to come and speak before a gathering, then any good speaker will prepare. And largely for a TED talk, you would prepare based on your life experiences. So what did I see? I saw that I'd spent about over 2 decades in the Indian Administrative Service, over 2 decades in the World Trade Organization. And if you really reflect, these are 2 of the most chaotic entities possible. The bureaucracy, you're working in a completely chaotic environment. If you're a district magistrate, you absolutely do not know what tomorrow has in store for you. So if I've spent over 4 decades literally in chaos, and this is while I'm reflecting to come here, have I learned something? And I thought I'd learned a huge lot. Like you, chaos is certainly positive. Because if it wasn't positive, and I'm sure there are negative connotations to it certainly, but if chaos wasn't positive, then I wouldn't have had the kind of learning I had. So I sat down kind of reflecting, and I'll give you a few examples. The first big thing I realized was that chaos has a certain degree of embedded wisdom. There is wisdom in the chaos. It's waiting to be found. I'll give you an example. I was a young person. I must have been about 28, 29 years old. First district posting, and you've got a lot of enthusiasm. You go around the district, and what did I find? This is obviously about more than 45 years ago. That land records were in a shamble because एक वो बही खाता था from before 1990s. There was a certain new kind of part computerization coming in. And a third entire issue was of people who actually tilled the land. So there was completely, I would say chaos. Young officer, a lot of enthusiasm, आप लोगों की तरह से studied here, you all believed in plans and action plans. So I put in a lot of effort and came up with what I would call a fairly exhaustive plan on how to set the land records right. And as a young officer, the first thing you do is you take it up to your district manager, your commissioner, and you say, ये मैंने तैयार किया है, ये मुझे, कमियां नजर आई थी, and this is what I'm going to do. A wonderfully mature person, the commissioner, for a long time, he's no more now, he remained my mentor. बहुत ध्यान से पढ़ा उन्होंने. ये नहीं कि it wasn't that he just glanced through it. And then, in surprisingly, what did not seem to be a negative way, he said that the system will eat your plan for breakfast. And that was my first kind of, push when he said, देखो, there is a theoretical system and there is an operating chaotic system. He did not say chaotic, I'm adding the word. He said that there's a theoretical system. If it was theoretical, your plan would have addressed it. But there is a chaotic actual system. Go understand it and you'll find the solution there. And I did that. And I found the system existed wherein the village elders invariably were the arbitrators. What they decided mattered. And I realized then that if I could, in a way, imbibe them into the formal system, that was the solution. And then when I reflected, one of the commissioners' line came up to me. He said, Shishir, you're trying to draw a straight line through a terrain that is not straight, through a terrain that is all, complicated. तो उसमें straight line answer थोड़ी मिलेगा आपको. And if you can imbibe that chaotic or so-called chaotic system, this is what it appeared to me. It did not appear chaotic to the people there. So if you're willing not to seek for order, this is the worst thing we do. We seek chaos and we feel hame usko, we've got to put it into the box of order that we feel is order. But the minute you feel or you're happy to find the solution, or as I said, the embedded wisdom in that chaos, then you will find the chaos itself giving you the solution. So the first point I really wanted to make was, in the positive spirit that a lot of you raised your hands for, that there is certain amount of embedded vision in chaos. If we go about trying to impose our vision of order, our vision of what we think is a singular order, we will fail. But if we go about trying to understand the chaos and trying to find what is embedded inside the chaos, we'll probably find a solution which will be far more realistic. There is a Sufi saying which says, let the light into the wound and the wound will heal, not by closing up the wound. And similarly for chaos, if you try to box in the chaos, if you try to put it into neat boxes and try to find singular solutions, you will not. You will be able to really be able to only handle that chaos if you go into it and look for the embedded vision. So the first point I want to really leave with you is that look for the embedded vision within chaos. The second thing that I realized, chaos in a way leads to creativity. I had studied physics. And thank you for that introduction. I had studied physics. There is this principle in physics that when systems have been formalized just to that extent so that they can last, but are yet unstable enough to evolve, that is when creativity happens. So trust me, if there was no chaos, there would be no creativity. And again, I'm going to give you an example that you people are probably more familiar with, WTO and its negotiations. Now, WTO and negotiations have invariably produced results, or the few results that they've produced, when the system has appeared near close to a collapse. And that is the chaotic definition of WTO, when you're near close to it. When did the Doha round happen? The Doha round happened just after, it was the first big ministerial after the 9/11 incident. It was the first time that the developing countries had said, no, we're going to walk out. So no deal is better than a bad deal. And the system was nearing collapse. There was complete chaos. The third point, in a way, chaos forces you to act. Chaos forces you to find the lucidity that you're looking for. Who said that the importance of continuing to act is far, more important than looking at the certainty of success. Extremely important that you continue to act. And now, how does chaos force you to act? The chaos forces you to act because if you don't act, the chaos will remain the way it is. You're not going to find a solution. So it will literally force you to act. So the minute you act, the vision you have of the chaos or the chaotic situation will change, and that could lead you to act further, and that could lead you to reach the end. On the other hand, if you wait for clarity to appear and then only act, you're going to be far delayed. And that's not it. So chaos is also an instigator to act. So chaos, as a third point, certainly will force you to act. And when you act and you take the first steps, the whole pattern or the signals of chaos will change and will give you a new insight into chaos. In a way, it's like, those of you who've been on treks, you're seeing the same mountain. But when you walk, let's say, for an hour, the whole perspective of that mountain changes. You'll either have gone down further, you'll be looking up, or you'll have gone up a little and be looking slightly down. So it's not as if anything has changed. It's just that by, and I'm just giving that simile of walking, you're creating new perspectives, and that then often provides solutions. The fourth point, chaos also ensures that you will either look for more alternatives or you will minimize alternatives. Chaos can be of two kinds, and look on your own, this is much more related to personal experiences and personal life. If you look at your own life experience, you'll find either you have found the situation to be very chaotic because there were no options. You didn't know what to do. You really did not know what to do, and it was troubling, it was stressful, it was chaotic. That's one kind of situation. The other situation also which seems very chaotic is when you have multiple choices, when you really do not know what to do. You know, it's like standing not at a crossroad, but at the junction of eight roads. You don't know what to do because you can't see the end of any road. So chaos will either force you to expand choices or look for choices when none existed. Suppose you come to a standstill in your educational career. Chaotic. You might just decide, no, instead of going this way, I'm going to look for possibilities. Not just the UPSC, maybe, as you all are here, or look for the trade services, or look for a career as a trade law. You will try to expand your choices, because when choices will expand, part of the chaos, which is because of lack of choices, will improve. On the other hand, similarly, if chaos is because of multiple choices, then minimizing the choices will help, and chaos will push you to do that. In fact, when I was putting a few notes down, then this amazing gentleman he was amazing when I was growing up as a student of strategic international relations, a name being Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger had one amazing thing. He says, when there's lack of choices, that's when there is amazing and miraculous clarity. If choice hi nahi hai, then you have to go in a particular direction. So in a way, not having choices is not bad also. Even though I'm saying that most people would like to develop choices, but that is provided you have one choice. If you don't have multiple choices, but if you feel that the situation is chaotic either because of less choices or more, then certainly this is going to push you to do that. Fifth and probably final, chaos, or the decisions or the actions you take within chaos as you try to look for lucidity, also becomes a big learning process. Why? Because acting in situations that are chaotic could lead to some kinds of, if not failure, some kind of stumbles. No matter what you're told, generally we are all risk averse. Generally. Everyone will tell you, embrace risk, embrace failure. Very difficult thing to actually do, risk averse. So maybe we were risk averse, but yet took some step and we failed. The most important thing is to learn from that failure. That classical saying which goes, that the most intelligent people are those who can learn from others' failures. That probably will be a very small percentage. The next very large percentage is the people who learn from their own failures. And then there is a third percentage, which I hope none of you are in, who don't even learn from their own failures. But certainly, I think chaos will ensure that you look and when you act. And when you act, you will reflect on how you've acted in the past. And if you've acted in a certain way in the past, then you will certainly try to imbibe that learning into your future action, and there too, chaos can help. As I conclude, and as I was thinking and concluding, I realized that the biggest problem is we try and put, this is global. We want to standardize everything. Look at school education. We all come from very different backgrounds, very different mindsets, very different cultural heritages. We put it into a common school, we taught the same thing, and then that is the start of blocking us in. That is the start of putting us in little blocks. And that is when we start very, even without knowing it, we start thinking that the best way to deal with the chaos is to find an order in that chaos. And then there is this expectation of society, of a certain ethos, certain values. And when there is a clash, even a small clash between the values that you have inherited and imbibed and the values that society is looking to push into you, there is going to be a clash and there's going to be chaos. But regard that as where your individuality is going to evolve. If there wasn't a clash, your individuality wouldn't come out. So chaos certainly would lead to that. If you start pushing for seeking for clarity in chaos, it's not going to solve the problem at all. What you need to do is really move from what I'm saying is a very subconscious evaluation of that chaos to a conscious evaluation of the chaos. That's when lucidity will come in, and that's when you will start to take action to overcome what you may feel are the shortcomings of that situation. And the minute we start understanding chaos, the minute we start looking for solutions within rather than from without. Because it's also, the same situation may not be chaotic to someone else. If you look at a lot of interventions by Western countries in the Middle Eastern countries, it's because they thought that was entirely chaotic. And therefore, the very, very important thing was that we did not look for order of the kind within that chaos instead of transposing it. Let me end finally with this third life experience of mine. Already told you about, the civil service and then the W2 experience. You know what's been the third biggest kind of change in my life, which is chaotic? 25 years living in Switzerland. And then you shift to Delhi. And if you start looking at that as chaos, you're done for. You might as well go back, don't come back. But you've got to look really, I'm going to tell you just two examples which will actually make you feel proud of where we are. Sure, everyone talks about traffic. Traffic doesn't, it's so crowded, but it moves. It's chaotic. You stand at that IIT crossing. You see, my God. But yet it is moving. It moves. Someone will go like this, someone will go like, it'll move. The second thing, we talk about our systems and there are lots of people who will criticize it. India would be the only place where if you experience a medical issue in the morning, you would have seen a GP by noon, you would have had all your tests done by 3 p.m. and you would have seen a specialist by 6 p.m. Trust me, I lived in Geneva for 25 years. It would take me 3 months to get to that stage where you're getting to now. So if I would regard this as chaotic and try to, come here, but try to superimpose that things, कि भाई अगर if I किसी ने मुझे 10 का time दिया वो 10 ही बजे पहुंच जाएगा, it's not going to happen. So we've got to find our individual understandings, but trust me, what we often feel as chaos is not chaos, is lucidity. Thanks so much.